Proverbs, and the title of the series is called The Knowledge of God. And I'm taking that, well, from a verse that we're going to read in just a little bit. And this morning's title is Seek Wisdom. In Proverbs chapter 4, we're going to be in Proverbs chapter 2 today, but in Proverbs chapter 4, in the Revised Standard Version, there's a verse that I find quite humorous. And Solomon writes this: "The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom." And that's kind of the big idea. It's like, okay, here's where you start. Just seek wisdom. But before we turn to the text, let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for life. I don't know how you thought of all these things that you created. Well, it says you did it by your wisdom. Thank you for creating us and giving us life and giving us the ability to love and to feel and to laugh and even to cry. The heights that art and poetry and music take us to, the laughter of a little child. I don't know how you came up with all of this, and it says that you have more in store, that for eternity, when we live with you, we will experience your kindness. And so I just ask you this morning to pour your kindness out so that we get a little taste. You are infinite, but give us a taste. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. When I was in my early 20s, well, about 22, 23, I kind of went on a wisdom quest because I was in need. I didn't know what to do. I had a young wife and a little baby girl, and I was kind of lost. And I was working in Waconia at a factory making treadmills for Jane Fonda. Well, not Jane Fonda personally, but it was her company. I was making $6.75 an hour. I know, I got that in 1 hour. And I was trying to figure out, like, what do I do? And so as I'm sitting there making treadmills, I would have my lovely wife, she would record, this was back when KTIS had preachers, she would record sermons for me, and I would listen to them as I'm standing there putting the little buckles in. And Chuck Swindoll was, of course, one of my favorites, and he did a series in the book of Proverbs, and I loved it. And he had a sermon out of Proverbs chapter 2, which is the passage we are going to be looking at today. And he called it For Minors Only. And he said, I don't mean minors as in people under 18. I mean for those who are willing to dig, for people who are willing to go down into the depths of earth and find the silver and the gold or whatever precious metals they are willing to go after. And I just I need wisdom. And then what really helped me was when I realized how closely connected wisdom and holiness are. Because you see, holiness is kind of an abstract concept. Like God is holy, and you read the story in Isaiah 6, and the glory fills the temple, and there's smoke, and there's cherubim, and there's eyes all over, and they're crying out, holy, holy, holy. And that is amazing, and it's awesome, but I can't attain that. I can't make the room filled with glory. I'm just me. And so then it says, be holy as I am holy. I'm like, well, how am I supposed to do that? And then I realized that you could never, ever, ever make a wise choice that was unholy. And you can never, ever, ever make a holy choice that is unwise. Holiness and wisdom are so closely connected that you cannot act out one without the other. And in the same way, foolishness and evil, or foolishness and wickedness, are connected. You can never do something that is evil that is also not foolish. And when I say foolish and wise, I mean by the biblical definition of wisdom. There's earthly wisdom. There's what John Bunyan calls the worldly wise man. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the true wisdom of God. And then I realized that really the book of Proverbs, it's 31 chapters that teaches us how to be like God. It teaches us how to be holy. And without holiness, no one can please God. And so I was like, I love Proverbs. I kind of went like Proverbs crazy and almost ignored the rest of the Bible for a while because it was like candy to me. So I'm hoping it's like candy to you. If not, at least a good cough drop from Walgreens. So we are going to begin chapter 2. The first verse says this: my son, if you accept my words. Now it's interesting in here because Solomon is writing, King Solomon, wisest man who ever lived until Jesus. We know that because Jesus said the Queen of Sheba traveled to see Solomon, and now I tell you one wiser than Solomon is here. But up until the time of Jesus, if you're in second place to Jesus, that's pretty good. So here's Solomon, and he wants to give his wisdom to his son. He says, my son, if you accept my words. He's really giving one command, but he does it in 8 different ways. The first one, if you accept my words. That means you have to hear them and say, these are true. I will accept them. I will receive this. If you accept my words and store up my commands within you. And that's totally different. Because that's not just hearing and accepting. That's actually saying, this is something that I need to store up. Like, some of you have pantries at home. Does anyone have a pantry? Yeah. How many of you have beans in your pantry? There we go. You store up beans in your pantry. And then you go to the store and you're like, beans, 37 cents. I think we need more beans because Thanksgiving is coming. In the same way that people store up beans in their pantry, he says, you need to take these words of mine and store them up. Remember them. Tuck them away. Bury them inside of you. Store up my commands within you. Turning your ear to wisdom. Literally, it's incline your ear. Have you ever heard someone who's struggling to hear and they say something, this is what they do? Huh? That's what they do. That's what he's saying. Turn your ear to wisdom. There's noise all around you. There's noise all around the world. Turn your ear to wisdom. Apply your heart to understanding. And that word apply, I think about those infomercials when they say, like, you just apply the wax like this, but you have to work it. You rub, you apply it. It's hard work. Apply your heart to understanding. Indeed, if you call out for insight, and I think about, it's a terrifying thing if you've ever lost your child for a short period of time. But here's what very calm, cool parents suddenly become. Raging screamers who are frantic. It's like, I can't, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? And you're running around and you're looking. And he says, if you do that, if you call out for insight, and if you cry aloud for understanding, and if you look for it as for silver, and search for it as for hidden treasure. And I remember Chuck Swindoll said this. He said, if I told you that there was $1 million buried out behind the church, how many of you would grab a shovel? You'd be like, well, you're gonna look. I mean, how many of you have lost a $20 bill and you can't stop looking in the house? You're like, where is it? It has to be in my pockets. It has to be. And this is what he's saying about wisdom. Go after it. Seek it. And here's the other thing that he tells us. He actually says this in a different chapter, but this is bonus material. He says, wisdom cries aloud in the streets. Think about that. At the busy intersections, wisdom is right there. And I remember reading that thinking, how can that be? And I was actually sitting in the car at a stop sign in the passenger seat. And I'm saying, well, I'm here in the street. Where's wisdom? And I'm looking around. And then I realized it's everywhere. The stop sign is wisdom. The stop sign is telling me you should stop here because another car is going to go through. And if you ignore that stop sign, you're going to have a problem. And wisdom is the speed limit sign that says, here, you should go 35. Because if you try to go 45, you might see some flashing lights, woo, 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 and they'll remind you. Wisdom is when you get a bad grade on a paper. Wisdom is saying, yeah, maybe you should study a little more. Wisdom is when you get a late notice on a bill, and it says, yeah, see that date up there? We're not joking. That's when we would like our money because we gave you electricity. Wisdom is everywhere. It's crying out to us. It's having the ability to discern and to see and to hear. And he says, if you seek for it, if you turn your ear, if you store these commands up, if you apply them, if you look for it as you do for silver or for hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord. And sometimes I wonder, Like, I wonder, how can people live in this beautiful world and completely ignore and reject God? And the answer is because they don't understand the fear of the Lord. They don't understand it. Like, you talk about the fear of the Lord, and I'm like, it's like a foreign language. The Apostle Paul says that they have been taken captive by the devil to do his will. That the God of this age has blinded their eyes. And when your eyes are blind, you can't see. One night I was up in northern Minnesota where there isn't all the lights everywhere, and we were sitting and we were going to go out and look at the sky because I was told the sky would blow me away because you could see the northern lights and you could see so many more stars than you could ever see in the cities. And I went out from that bright kitchen and I looked up and I saw nothing but dark. And I was trying, and I knew they were up there, but I could not see them. Now, in a few minutes, my eyes adjusted, and it was beautiful. But when you can't see, you can't see. And they don't understand the fear of the Lord. And Solomon says, you have to work at it. You have to apply yourself. You have to store up. You have to treasure up. You have to cry aloud. You have to search for it as for buried treasure. And then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. God will give you his knowledge. That's amazing. He will give you his knowledge. You can know of him. You can know what he thinks. The book of Proverbs is a holiness manual to teach us to be like God, to teach us to make our way in the world. He says, for the Lord gives wisdom. He gives it away. He wants you to have wisdom. The question isn't if he wants you to have wisdom, are you capable to see it? Are you capable to internalize it? It says the fool is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer discreetly. And as long as the fool goes around thinking he's right, he can't hear because he's right. Like, if somebody knows everything, what can you teach them? Nothing, because they already know everything. And what if what they know is wrong? They don't know that because they know everything. You can't teach them. He says, for the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He holds success in store for the upright, and he is a shield to those whose walk is blameless. And as a young boy, I would hear stories about Joseph, and it talked about God being with him and God having favor. And I would read a verse like that. He holds success. Other translations say victory in store for the upright. And I thought it was kind of like magic. Like here's Joseph, and God likes Joseph. So God goes, poof, Joseph, you'll be successful. And then Joseph does a good job in Potiphar's house, and he ends up in the dungeon, and God says, poof, Joseph, you'll be successful here. And then Joseph makes his way to being the second man in all of Egypt, and God goes, poof, Joseph, you'll be successful here. And then I read the story a little closer, and you realize how wise was Joseph. If you were in charge of a country and you knew that there were going to be 7 years of famine so severe that the world would starve, and they said, solve it, that's your problem. You'd be like, what? Can I do math instead? But Joseph had wisdom. And he said, here's what we have to do. We have to have storehouses scattered all throughout Egypt so they're easily attainable. And then we need to take 20% of everything that grows and store it away. And we need to keep track of it so that as we are using it, we know how much we were going through. And Pharaoh was like, whoa. Where are we going to find a man as wise as you? And Joseph became the man. And then I thought to myself, if Joseph had that kind of wisdom when he was running all of Egypt, there's a pretty good chance that when he's running the dungeon, he's like, here's what we do. Here's how we fix this. And when he did that, when he's working in Potiphar's house, he probably said, well, here's what we should do. Here's how we should take care of this. And Potiphar's like, wherever that Joseph goes, good things happen. He's a good man because he had the wisdom of God. And God gives wisdom. James says, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. And I know this sounds really simple. There's a difference, though, between something that is simple and something that is easy. Because this crying out and this searching, it's not easy. And you mull these. I mean, have you ever read a proverb and you look at it and you're like, I have no idea what that means. What does that mean? And then you have a choice. You can just skip it, or you can say, okay, I'm going to apply my heart to understanding this. I'm going to seek out the meaning of these words. And if you do that with life, if you seek out the meaning, you see, many people have said to themselves, why did I do that? And very few have ever stopped and said, yeah, I need to figure out why I did that. Because if I don't figure out why I did that, I'm just going to keep doing it, and I'm going to keep asking myself, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Why did I do that? He holds success in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless, for he guards the course of the just, and he protects the way of his faithful ones. And I also used to think this was kind of magic, like if you're good and you love Jesus, he will just protect you. And he does protect you, and his angels guard us. But there's a far more practical way this is true. See, as far as I know, I have never ever been wanted by the police. And that means every single time in the history of my life when I've heard sirens, woo, 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 I've never had this thought, I bet they're coming for me. I better hide. But people who are wanted by the police, they hear sirens and they're like, I gotta go, I gotta get out of here. But when you don't do certain things, you are protected from certain consequences. And when you live this wise life, then you don't have to fear. Your way is protected. Your course is guarded. He says, then, after all of this seeking and learning and applying and digging, then you will understand, and look at this verse closely, then you will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path. Think about a relationship. We'll use a husband and wife relationship. So if you have a husband and he says, I'm going to seek the knowledge of God. You know, all the wives are looking around right now. Stop that. I saw you, Raylin. If the husband says, I'm going to devote myself to wisdom, and I will know what is just and right and fair, every good path. And if the wife says, I will devote myself to wisdom, I will know what is just and right and fair, every good path. What happens when they have a problem? They know what is just and right and fair, and they know every good path. And it's an easy thing. And as we grow wisdom, you see, there was a time in my lovely house when we would have a lot of trauma about little things because we didn't know how to handle them. Like milk would spill, and that was a big deal. There's like arms waving and rushing and going and picking up kids. And then we learn, okay, here's what you do. You grab a washcloth and you clean it up. This is very important. You rinse it out. I learned that. Because if you don't rinse it out, later it's like, something stinks in here. But you see, you gain wisdom a bit at a time, and pretty soon milk is spilling, and you're like, I can handle that. That's no big deal. And in life, you are constantly going to have problems. I'm just telling you right now. Sometimes we act like when there's a problem, it's something unusual. Like, I can't believe this happened. My car died. How old is it? It's a 1997. How many miles? 345,000. Okay, yeah. So we have problems, and we'll just give numbers to problems. Let's say there's a level 1 problem. Spilled milk, that's a level 1 problem. And level 1 problems stump you until you learn how to solve level 1 problems. And then it's like, level 1, piece of cake. And then guess what happens? You hit a level 2, and you're like, oh, great. But once you figure out level 2, then you hit level 3. And from that point on, once you've solved level 3 problems, anytime you have a 1, 2, or a 3, piece of cake. And then you hit a 4. But each time you grow and learn, you just keep mowing through problems, and they actually become something else. They are no longer problems. They're just a nuisance or a hiccup or a speed bump. He says, then you will understand what is right and just and fair. Every good path. It'll be easy to you because wisdom will be in you. In fact, he says, for wisdom will enter your heart. You'll be taking wisdom with you because it will be in your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. And can you imagine how great that would be? Like, it's Friday afternoon and you're like, oh man, I can't wait. I've been working all week long. It's Friday night. Finally, I'm going to have fun. What are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to read Proverbs because knowledge is sweet to me. If there's anything that I want to do, it's get more knowledge because it is your tastes actually change. They change for the better. Things that you once found appealing aren't nearly as appealing as they used to be, and something that is delightful to your soul, like knowledge, is like, oh, that's what I want. That is what I want. And Solomon is telling his son, this is what you need to do. You need to apply yourself, incline your ear, treasure these things, cry out for them, search for them, work for them, because the rewards will be so great. And then he goes on to say, discretion will protect you, and understanding will guard you. Wisdom, and now he tells us 2 specific people groups we will be saved from. Wisdom will save you from the ways of the wicked. And you know what? I would love to tell you, and I realize that our culture is more and more moralistically relative. But this week earlier, I was reading an article about human trafficking and some of the things they do to children. And I can tell you there is evil in the world. Now, we might disagree on exactly what it is, but it's there. And he says, wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men, from men whose words are perverse, who have left the straight paths to walk in dark ways. And Jesus said in John chapter 3, and this is the verdict, light has come into the world, but people loved darkness more than light. He says, they have left the straight paths to walk in dark ways, who delight in doing wrong. Look at what he says. They delight in doing wrong, and they rejoice in the perverseness of evil. Something that everyone else says, that's evil and that's perverse. And they say, no, that's what I delight in. How different is that from the one who has knowledge that is sweet to their soul? He says, wisdom will save you from these men. And as a parent, I can tell you, there are people I don't want my children spending time with. There are boys that I don't want my boy. I know he's 20 years old and has a big scruffy lumberjack beard now, but he's still my boy. And there are people I don't want him spending time with. He says, they delight in doing wrong and they rejoice in the perverseness of evil, whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. And wisdom will also save you from the adulterous woman. Because I can tell you this, there are girls I don't want my boy hanging out with. And I know, I understand things get broken and people go through all sorts of things, and I understand that. But when it comes to my kids, there are still people that I don't necessarily want them spending time with. Wisdom will also save you from the adulterous woman, from the wayward woman with her seductive words, who has left the partner of her youth and ignored the covenant she made before God. Surely her house leads down to death, and her paths to the spirit of the dead. None who go to her return or attain the paths of life. And when I read this, it reminds me of a song that my uncles often sing. There is a house In New Orleans, they call the rising sun, and it's been the ruin of many a poor boy. And God, I know I'm one. See, I don't have to convince you that there's evil in the world. As the Apostle Paul says, your own poets have done so. Later in the song, he says this, mothers, tell your children not to do the things I've done. A life of sin and misery in the house of the rising sun. And then the next lyric is the most fascinating. He says, with one foot on the platform and one foot on the train, I'm heading back to New Orleans to swing the ball and chain. It's like, I know what it's done to me. It has ruined me. And I'm warning parents, don't let your children go this way, but I can't stop. I'm in too deep. And here I stand with one foot on the platform and one foot on the train, and I'm heading back to swing that ball and chain. That's what he's writing about. He's saying this is what happens. You can't live a life of foolishness. You can't disregard what is holy and what is wise and accept what is evil and foolish and not pay for it. And another one of the songs that I really like that Johnny Cash remade it. I like his version. But the original version was written by Trent Reznor of the Nine Inch Nails. I'm sure you all have their albums. Exactly. But listen to these haunting words. He's talking about his life and his addictions. And he says, I hurt myself today to see if I could feel. I focused on the pain. It's the only thing that's real. The needle tears the hole, that old familiar sting. I try to kill it, thank you. I tried to memorize these so I could do this without. I try to kill it all away, but I remember everything. And then he says, what have I become, my sweetest friend? Everyone I know goes away in the end. And you can have it all, my empire of dirt. I will let you down. I will make you hurt. In the very last words of the song, he says, if I could start again, 1,000,000 miles away, I would keep myself. I would find a way. See, that's what this is about. It's about a choice between life and death. And it's not immediate death, but it's soul death. And it's empty. And as I was thinking about song lyrics, it goes on and on and on and on and on. George Michael wrote, the road that I have walked upon, well, it's filled my pockets, but it's emptied out my soul. What's that worth if you have full pockets and an empty soul? And he says, my son, seek, find, apply yourself. He goes on and he says, thus, if you learn all these things, you will walk in the ways of the good, and you will keep to the paths of the righteous. How much better is that? He says, for the upright will live in the land, and the blameless will remain in it, but the wicked will be cut off from the land, and the unfaithful will be torn from it. And it's just true. Like if there are two bankers in town and you know that one is a thief and a liar and he steals, and the other one is honest and upright, which one are you going to trust? And when you heard about that poor 5-year-old boy that had been beaten multiple times, and then finally his mother killed him and they buried him did you say, oh, I wonder what happened to that poor mom? Maybe, partly, but another part of you was like, that's just wrong. And something should have been done. We want justice. We need it. It's what we were created to function on. And the book of Proverbs teaches us how to have these things. It teaches us how to be like God, how to know every just and right and fair path. But then we have to come to this reality. Yeah, but it might be a little late for me now. I'm far down the road, and I've made a lot of choices, and I swing that ball and chain. Well, we just finished Easter, and one of my favorite stories, and I mentioned it briefly last Sunday, It's in the Gospel of Matthew, though, and we were in Luke. It's Judas in Matthew chapter 27. Because it says that after he realized that Jesus was condemned to die,